Did it go live? It
Yes, it
did.
is.
Usually I see something and I didn't see it. Hey, everybody. Wendy Melrose here with Healed Whole Called. And today's guest is someone who knows what it feels like to take a leap of faith and land in the unknown. John Kundly moved across the country chasing a dream and within 2 weeks found himself homeless, sleeping in his car. But what looked like a failure was actually the beginning of his calling. So John now speaks to students and young professionals about purpose, potential, and the truth that life they long for is closer than they think. It's a conversation about detours, obedience, and discovering that sometimes the long way around is actually God's way through. So, hey, John,
Hey there.
how are you?
I'm great, Wendy. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I would love for you to take us back to the moment 2 weeks into moving Los Angeles, sleeping in your car. What was going on in your heart during that season?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think, looking back on that moment, I had just so much uncertainty as to what I should be doing. Like, what is the next move? Do I go back home where, my family was waiting for me with open arms, so to speak? But I also knew that if I ended the journey from coming from Ohio out to Los Angeles at that point, if I'd ended it then, I would have never gone back. And there was this point where I felt like, have I done enough yet to feel like I could turn back? And I just, even though I'm sitting there, Target parking lot, homeless, all the stuff that I own in my car, I still felt like there was more to give or more to try or more to push. And, at that time I just prayed, I was like, God, tell me what to do. Give me something, give me a direction. And I just heard the word forward. And so felt to me like that was really it. And, I kind of joke about it, but it's kind of like at that moment I was like, man, I realized that at that time I should have asked for directions, because just the one direction wasn't quite what I was hoping for. I was looking for maybe a little more detail. Didn't get the detail that I was hoping for there, but I still understood the assignment, so to speak, and I went forward.
Awesome.
And clicked the clicked the Craigslist ad for a SoCal gas job, which I would have never thought I'd see that on Craigslist.
Well, can I ask? I forgot to ask. How old were you when you decided to do this?
Good question. Yeah, I was 25 when I moved here, and that was in 2005. So all your people can do the math on how old I am. But yeah, it was a while ago. But it's funny because like you would think at 25 you've got life a little bit more figured out than I probably did at the time. And I just I had sort of cruised after getting through college and was bartending and just living life and didn't really have the courage yet to move to Los Angeles, even though I knew that's really what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah, well, I get it. I've moved across the country, but the other direction to upstate New York at one point when I was 23, just drove straight through, had everything in my car, and things didn't quite go according to plan. But there was also 9/11 in there, so it was like a bit of an extra.
What do you mean 9/11? Did something happen?
So I lived in upstate New York, and then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
With the towers coming down and all of that. And just finding that paralyzed the whole Northeast. And so it was like finding a different job and all the different, I'm like, I was running out of money fast. I'm like, just forget it. I'm going to get out of here. So
yeah.
I didn't stay. I don't know what would have happened had I chosen to. But I am looking forward to hearing the rest of the story about what it's like when you do choose to stay, because
sure.
For anyone who ever has pivoted backwards and gone back home, it still also doesn't mean the story's over. But there's just something to be said of staying the course. And you learned a beautiful lesson on perseverance with that. So now you look back, where do you see God most clearly in that chapter of your story?
Well, I mean, I like to say that every door that I have ever walked through, God's fingerprints are on the door handle. Mm-hmm. And I really, believe that, because it was just so much happened in that time period for me that was outside of my control. And I think when we're talking about turning back or going forward, it really becomes what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what's the goal here? If the goal is for you to serve yourself, and I'm not saying that anybody who turns back is doing that, but I think when you are worried more about what's affecting you, that tends to have an effect of people turning back. When you
Mhm.
try to look at it from how can I serve others, or how is this moment going to really push forward maybe a bigger agenda that's beyond, me. Okay,
Mhm.
maybe I go and just give it one more shot, or maybe I go and another day. Let's
Right.
one more day. Let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And it was in those moments where I felt like right when I was about to say, okay, I'm done, I'm gonna go, something would happen, would keep me there for just another moment, and then another moment. And so it was like I was living, like there's a song by Lifehouse, old song called Hanging by a Moment, I think. And that certainly was probably the theme song to my life at the time, because it was literally moment by moment. I didn't have, it wasn't like I won the lottery and all my problems were solved, right? Like I got it reminds me a lot of God, when the Israelites were living off of manna, right? Like they were just, it was day by day, and they couldn't take more than a day's worth, or else God would turn it sour and ruin it. It felt like that. It felt like I was
Mhm.
just living each day, hoping for another thing to get me through whatever it is that I was going through. And maybe we'll get to it a little bit later, but there's a parallel to what I'm going through as we even speak right now, which is kind of interesting. So I think there's a really cool lesson that just because you've gone through it doesn't mean that you're done going through it, or that you'll never go through it again. It's a repetitive process, and the more that you can get into moments like that where you're uncomfortable, uncertain, it makes your life all the more interesting.
Yeah, well, like we can stay in that moment a minute, because I think everything that we've ever been through, like I can't remember if it was my business mentor or someone else that had said, today you've survived everything you've
Yeah.
been through. You've been through the hardest stuff you've ever could have encountered, and you lived.
Yep.
So the likelihood of that still happening is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing there too, one thing that I teach in my book is confidence. And I sort of have a formula for confidence and how you build it, because I think a lot of people struggle with having confidence, and I'm one of them for sure. And so I had to create some sort of way to think about confidence. And the way that I thought about it was, it's really exposure and evidence, those two elements coming together. And exposure is obviously you getting an opportunity to live through a hard thing. And we can talk about me moving to California, getting homeless. Like that is definitely exposure to something that makes me uncomfortable, something that gives you just, turns your stomach, makes you want to run away. And I always say that if there's something in your life, that you're running away from, probably a good indicator of something you actually need to be running towards, because you actually need to face that in order to grow, in order to improve, in order to be the better version of yourself. But anyway, the evidence, or excuse me, the exposure piece is going through and putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, and then living through it. And then the evidence obviously is the proof, the receipts, so to speak, that you have to say, hey, look, remember that thing when I was homeless and I didn't know what I was going to go do? Well, I got through it, and here I am. So now the next hard thing, either it's not as hard, or it's confidence that you're building to say, hey, I can do it. And you start to develop this sort of resilient confidence, as I like to call it, because you start to see, oh no, I can do hard things, and I'm not going to die. And I also am thriving a little bit in this moment. And so it's not just survive, but it's thrive.
Yeah. And one of my friends had just said recently too that um, bad days will
Mm.
pass, and even great days will pass.
Yeah.
And so it's just remembering that even though life still goes like this, it is that resilience, confidence that can help you withstand. I mean, it'd be nice if the highs were higher, longer, like that the plateau was
Yes,
a little longer,
for
but
sure.
it feels like a whole, like you're at the tip of the mountain. It's like it's that long. It's how
Yep.
long, and you're back on the other side.
Yeah, but it's that tip that gets you through, right? You remember the tip, because it's the most amazing feeling to know that you've actually done something and pushed through, and you've seen greatness. And when you've tasted greatness, it's hard to walk away from it at that point.
So that's so true. And so when you talk about living a mediocre version of life versus stepping into purpose, when did you first realize you were made for something more?
Ooh. I think when you think about where I came from a town called Mineral Ridge, Ohio, and you can't even find it on a map. That's how small it is. So the closest city that you can probably find on a map is Youngstown. And Mineral Ridge has 3,900 people. Like, that's it. And we weren't even like part of the census until 1990, just to give you an example of how small this place was. Like one stoplight, roads were dirt at one point. Anyway, when I was living there, the sort of like formula for success for my family or the people that were around me was you get a high school diploma, you get a job, you buy a house as close to your parents as you can, you get a job working at their company if you can, and then you raise a family and you kind of live and die in the same place that you were born in without ever having leaving. And a lot of my family, God love them, they felt that was sort of their calling to stay there and do that. And I loved that for them, but it didn't feel like that was me. It didn't feel like that was for me. And so I always felt like, well, I need a bigger city. I want to go see what a big city looks like. And I feel like God's put something in my heart and in my soul to share with the world. And so I need to go have a bigger platform to go do that. And so I think early on I thought about it, and then I sort of buried it for a really long time, because you hit middle school and then every goal you absolutely have goes out the window, because I felt so much like a failure, I guess, in middle school. And because I wasn't a popular person, I wasn't really one of the cool kids. And so I just sort of, meandered through, and again, one of the downsides of being in a small town, you go to school with the same kids from kindergarten to 12th grade. So if I'm called, pudding pants in kindergarten, guess what I'm being called at senior year? I'm still pudding pants. And so you can't ever get away from the reputation you develop as a young person. So I was eager to get away from that small town. And I went to a slightly bigger town in Toledo, where I got my college degree. And I was able to sort of reinvent myself. I was able to be whatever it is that I felt like I wanted to be at my core. And I sort of came out of my shell at that point, and really started to realize people were a passion of mine, and helping people was even a bigger passion of mine. And so that started things. And I remember I used to work at what used to be called Express, or used to be called Structure. Now it's called Express. I was working there for the holidays, and I was folding clothes, and I wasn't great at the folding clothes part. And so my manager at the time was like, hey, just maybe you don't touch the clothes. Let's try that. Maybe what you do is you talk to people, and see how that works. And so kindly telling me how bad I was at the job, but didn't want to let me go, because she I had some favor with her, thankfully. So I just started talking to people, and what they found was that they liked the entertainment aspect of what I could bring to the table. Whether you're laughing at me or with me, I really didn't mind. I just wanted to make sure people were laughing and having a good time. And so during the holidays, when that long line would form to check out and things, I would create all kinds of scenarios for people. I would, if I didn't like you, I would change the wait time to 2 hours. If I thought that you were maybe a cute girl, maybe I would change it to 5 minutes and move you right to the front of the line. I'm not saying I did that all the time, but it might have happened once or twice. And this woman in line had said something to me that changed my life. She says, have you ever considered being an actor? And I was like, no, but that sounds amazing. What is that? Like, how do I do that? What do I got to do? Where do I sign up? And so I started doing acting in Toledo a little bit. And then that really is what sparked that fire for me to move to Los Angeles, because I was going to come out here and act like professionally. It was going to be glorious. And so that was the catalyst for me, where then I felt my platform was going to get massive. And it was like, okay, now I can talk to people. Now I can reach people. Now I can help influence positively in people's lives. And so that started this whole journey. And I was probably like 20 at the time when I heard that, and it took me 5 years to get the courage up to move. Credit to a friend of mine named John, who sat me down at an Applebee's one day and said, look, you're never going to leave until you write it down, until you actually put it as a goal. So in April of 2005, I wrote down my goals. And one of the goals was to leave Ohio and be in Los Angeles by August 1st. And August 1st, I landed in Los Angeles.
That's really cool. So my next question doesn't quite make sense a little bit. I want to wait a minute, because there's a lot of life that's happened in the last 21 years that you've been there now. Yeah. And I truly am a believer. Lance Wallnall talks about convergence, right? Nothing is ever wasted. Everything we've ever lived is for
Yes.
now, and which is why we see so often people in their late 40s, 50s, 60s go poof, because all of a sudden everything works together.
Yes.
And I was sharing it, I think I was sharing it on a podcast yesterday about how, it didn't have to work that way, because sometimes God has to teach us all the little life lessons in order to do. I mean, look, Moses didn't deliver the Israelites till he was 80.
Right.
He
Right.
didn't have the confidence. I mean, you almost kind of seem like to me a little bit like a modern day Moses, other than you're not delivering a lot of Los Angeles.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah. It's very kind of you to say.
people
Yeah.
that would be like, John set us free, right?
Right. Right.
But that's a whole other story another day.
We'll get that next one, maybe.
But it's very interesting how, I mean, almost every single story, even Joseph had to go through all of those things to learn everything he needed in order to create the storehouses to help save, Israel, the family, all the things. And
Yes.
so often that is a theme. And so if it was a theme in biblical times, it's probably still a theme now.
One, you're so wise. I can't even tell you how much I love that idea, and I say it a lot. And I reference it from the movie Slumdog Millionaire. If you remember that movie, and if for those of your listeners who haven't seen it, it's about a guy who sits down at like a $1 million. Who wants to be a millionaire? Basically, it's the Indian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and every question that he gets in that setting is a question that leads back to an experience he had in his life. And it was almost as if he had the cheat code without even realizing it, because every question he could answer because he lived it. And it was just a fascinating story. And the more I thought about my life, I thought about it in that exact way, the way that you just said, right? Everything that I've done, every experience that I've had has led to me being here. And I've needed all of the things that I've experienced over the 47 years that I've been alive, right, to get to this point. And what I think is fascinating is I would say that I felt like Slumdog Millionaire, and I felt like I was unique. But what I've come to realize is what you just said. It's not unique. It's everybody. Everybody is living that. It's just a matter of being aware of it and then trying to find opportunities to like sort of leverage the tools and the experiences that you've had. And, you mentioned Moses. I think this is probably a really aha moment for me was when things happen to you that are negative or that you perceive them as negative. Maybe somebody doesn't like you, maybe you get fired, maybe you break up with somebody or someone breaks up with you, right? If you remember back to the story of Moses, God hardened Pharaoh's heart for a reason. He hardened his heart to prove and to show his glory, right? He wanted to show how powerful God was. And so he purposely puts Pharaoh in Moses's life to cause him turmoil, to cause him stress, to cause him all kinds of things. And it led to God being glorified when he leads them through, the Red Sea and all the great stuff happens with the water and the armies get drowned and all that stuff. But without hardening Pharaoh's heart, that doesn't happen. And I think when we're in the moment of the hardening, like what I mean by that is if we have somebody in our life who is mistreating us or not being fair to us, maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a significant other, maybe it's a family member, they're not treating you well for a reason. And we have to have faith that that reason is to glorify God in some way, somehow. And if you have to go through that in order for God to get glorified, that's kind of part of the deal, right? And I just think it's probably a good reminder for everybody that everything bad that's happening in your life, if there are bad things that are happening in your life, there's a great verse that I love that says that what the devil intends for evil, God will turn for good. And I just think so many times that we see something at face value that's negative, evil, destructive for us. But I also feel like at the end, once we get through it, we're going to be able to see, hey, that was actually for a purpose. And that was really something that needed to happen to strengthen me, number one, and be able to have a great testimony for somebody else, down the road.
That's so good. And it's so perfect. And just as I heard from another woman before, I would love to be able to give her credit if I could remember her name. But she had said, what has been to me has been done to me, has been done for me. And I use that with my clients a lot because that's how we can shift. It doesn't make what that person did or the situation that happened was okay, but it can be done. It was done for you in order to be a catalyst for future change.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So,
love that.
I would love for you to speak directly to the young person who's anxious about their future, or you speak directly already. To young people who are anxious about their future, especially those who feel like a good life might not be possible for them. What do you believe they're truly hungry for beneath the fear?
So this is probably my favorite thing to talk about because I see it so much and I lived it, right? As I mentioned, I came from really humble beginnings, a super small town, and success was determined to be like just buying a house and living a job, right? Which is nothing. There's no purpose in that. There's no service in that. There's no joy in that. And I think when you have a young person who is thinking, "Hey, I don't know if a good life is possible for me or is out there for me," I would disagree 100%. And what I would say is, number one, you've got to identify what that purpose is in your life. And again, kind of similar to the confidence formula, I've got a purpose formula as well, right? And it's really three things. When you can find joy, true joy, what is something that really makes you happy? When I consult with people and I do career coaching and whatnot, and they ask me what they should be doing, I say, well, what do you like? What are you excited about? What gets you out of bed? If you could do anything, it doesn't have to be work related, but what are the things that excite you and you're really passionate about? And we start there, and then we move into what gives you peace? What gives you a lot of peace? Like, I know for me, when I'm in conflict in my soul, it's typically because I'm doing something that's outside of my purpose, or it's not really the thing that God has called me to. And so when you're living in that purpose, when you have an alignment with your soul, there's just a peace that you get inside. And I'm not saying that bad things aren't still going to happen to you, or you're not going to get anxious, or you're not going to have problems in your life, but internally you're going to know that you're aligned with what you're supposed to be doing. And that is an amazing feeling. And I can only say that if you haven't experienced it, you know you haven't, because once you do, it's sort of life changing. And then that third piece is, we were never meant to serve ourselves, right? We were always meant to serve others. And the great analogy that I give there is, a fruit tree, right? If you take an apple tree and it yields fruit, right? It bears fruit. Well, you don't take the apple and hand it back to the tree, right? Like, it's for others to enjoy. It's for others to have. And so when you think about the gifts and the talents that you have inside of you, your purpose and your role is to give those gifts away and to showcase those gifts for people, to help people. And so I think when you've got somebody who feels stagnant, or they feel like, man, I don't know if there's a great life out there for me, I would first start with identifying that purpose. And once you do, everything else will sort of not fall in line, because it's not that easy, but you'll at least have a better direction, and you'll have a direction once you get that started. And then there's multiple steps after that, but that's the first one.
That's amazing. So if students or young professionals truly grasp that their life is within reach, how would that change communities, especially underprivileged or overlooked communities?
And this is a community that I'm very passionate about, once again, because I think I relate so much to them. And I know that maybe when I walk in a room, you don't necessarily think that initially, because I don't look like I came from there. But man, when I tell you, living paycheck to paycheck, my family, my mom was a banker, my dad was a mechanic, not a lot of money, rolling around in Mineral Ridge, Ohio at that time. And so I feel like I can relate so well to these underserved communities. And part of what I do, I do teaching at community colleges out here in Los Angeles. And I do workshops out here for them. I go talk to LAUSD. It's very important to me that young people understand that there's a purpose and a path for their life that's beyond what they can even imagine. And I'll just give you a quick example. When I started speaking, I thought, hey, the ultimate goal for me, if I were to quote unquote make it, would be for me to do a TED Talk. And I thought that was just there's such prestige with that name, such prestige with that organization, and I have so much respect for them. And I said that would be the pinnacle of my career. And I feel like God sort of like, he's funny sometimes, because he was like, okay, how about that's the first thing we do, and then we go from there. And that's exactly what happened. And it was a blessing that I got an opportunity to do that. And I just think that the life that you think is yours, the life that you think is what's reasonable, is not even close to the beginning. And I think that we have to get to a point where, if you're not thinking, if the goal that you have, or the idea of your life that you have is all within your means and all within your ability to do, you're not thinking big enough, and you're not dreaming big enough. We've got to think beyond ourselves and say, it's going to take a miracle for X, Y, or Z to happen. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Now we're talking like, I want to talk crazy. I want to talk big. I want out of the box thinking. And when you do that, amazing things happen. Amazing things. Yeah. You start thinking about things, and I don't say magically appear, but it's powerful when you put something in your mind, and then it starts to become a reality.
Yeah. And one of the things that I realized is, I'm a big risk taker. I jump off the cliff of entrepreneurship and I build my ship on the way down. And right before it goes
Mhm.
through my door, it gives me enough to give me enough air.
What a great visual. That's amazing. I love that.
And so I'm like, okay. And so people were just like, I don't know how you do it. But what I've been learning, and the older I get, the more I realize, the more I just let go,
Mhm.
the more the Lord does his thing because we're out of our way. And the woman I had on the podcast this morning, I, I don't know if we were live or not, because sometimes you have your best conversations off air. I don't know how
Yeah,
it
yeah.
happened. But she had said, she goes, striving is like the tree. You talked about fruit tree earlier, right? And the
Mhm.
tree pushing and pushing the fruit out. Nothing it's going to do is going to make the fruit come out bigger or larger or more
Right,
abundant.
right.
The tree just rests in its gifts
Mhm.
and it allows God to work in and through it to produce the fruit.
Yep.
And so when we realize that for those who think that, oh, it's just within reach, there is one requirement. You have to step out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
And that's where knowing people like you to say, hey, John, I'm going to do this.
Yep.
And like, can I have encouragement? Encouragement goes a long way.
Oh, yeah. Well, you said so many things there that I loved. And one thing that you mentioned is the stepping, right? And I'm a huge proponent of stepping first, and in my TED talk, I say that, God can do anything, but I certainly think that he tends to move after we do. And it's because he wants to see our effort, right? He wants to see our commitment and openness to this, right? And one of my favorite Bible stories is when they actually step into the Jordan when the waters part, right? Um,
Right.
it says specifically the priest steps foot in the Jordan and then the waters parted, right? It wasn't the waters parted and the guy just walks on dry ground. There's no faith required for that, right? There's faith required in that first step. And I always say that you have to take that first step. God will take the next 10, right? And you got to but he can't take those 10 until you take yours. And so we have to look at it that way and step in faith to know that, hey, I might not be going the right direction. I don't know if this is the way I'm supposed to go, but I'm gonna tell you what, I feel compelled to at least take a step, and this is the direction that I'm gonna go. And God's big enough to redirect you. He does it all the time to me. So I think that there's a lot that you can learn from just stepping. I think that's such a critical skill to learn that we tend to not do, especially Christians and those who are believers, because we want to just say, okay, I'm going to let God tell me where to go. I'm going to wait for God and all this stuff. And I cringe when I hear that because it's not what God wants. It's not biblically accurate that it does say in there, be still and wait for the Lord. That's during a bunch of chaos and when you're trying to figure out your life, right? But when you're trying to navigate and get somewhere that you haven't been, it's not going to be God carrying you there. It's going to be you stepping and then him moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost kind of like a beautiful dance, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
And I would love for you to share as you continue to write your next book and expand your message, what kind of movement do you hope grows from this? Is it mentorship, faith, activation, practical tools, or something even bigger?
So my goal is never to motivate, right? I would die if somebody calls me a motivational speaker, only because like that motivation is great in the moment, but it fades, right? And then you go back to your life and it's kind of like, okay, now what? I want to be someone who equips you, right? Someone who helps you figure out what that next step's supposed to be for your life and gives you the tools to go and do that. And I think for me, activation, application are words that certainly pop up in my head of what I hope happens through, anything that I'm doing as far as, writing a book, giving a talk, talking to you. I just want people to walk away from anything that I do saying, okay, I've got what it takes to be great. And there's greatness within me. And I need to go and do my part and start to chase that. And so again, it starts the purpose, but it really becomes where are you going to step next? What's your next step look like? And how are you going to take that? Are you ready? And the answer is yes. There's nothing that you need to do to get ready to take that step except have the faith that it's going to happen.
Well, I really appreciate that. Before we wrap up, is there anything you're currently building, launching, or looking for support that our audience or network might be able to help with?
It's a good question. I can't say there's anything specific. I'm just trying to get my brand out there. I'm just trying to get my name out there a little bit because I do believe that I have a purpose for this. I've got a calling for this, and I just want to be able to reach as many people as possible. And so if you've got an event that you think you need someone to come in and speak at, workshops, even one-on-one coaching, feel free to reach out to me and my team, and we'll get set up with whatever it is that you need to make you successful and just maximize that potential that's inside of you.
Awesome. And is there a particular website or page that they should go to?
Yeah, you can find me at reachwithjohn.com. That's reachwithjohn.com. That's my main page for my website. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and my handle is at reachwithjohn. And so you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at reachwithjohn is my handle. And then I'd say my book, you can find that on Amazon. It's called Within Reach, Your Journey to Being Likable, Hireable, and Mostly Sane. You can find that on Amazon or I think we do have an ebook as well, and I'm working on an audiobook right now.
Oh, that's super awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for reminding us that detours are not disqualifications. They're often divine redirections. And your story is a lighthouse for anyone who ever feels behind, stuck, or uncertain about the future. The life God has for you may be closer than you think. And anyone listening, don't despise the detour. It may be the very road that's leading you home. Until next time.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry. That was